God makes the best sense of our moral obligations. Why? Well, think about the nature of an obligation. So let me give you an analogy. Let's say you're in a Chinese food restaurant, and at the end of your meal, right, you're looking forward to the fortune cookie. You crack open the fortune cookie. You always want to, it's always fun to read the fortune. And you open that fortune cookie, and on the fortune you pull out says, "Get up and leave now." How many of you would get up and leave? You would feel obligated to obey that command that's coming out on the fortune there. Well, I don't think anyone would, right? Okay, let's change it up. Let's say you're sitting there, you finish up your meal at the Chinese food restaurant, and you look over and there's a lady sitting at the table next to you, and she looks over at you and she says, "Get up and leave now." Are you going to get up and leave now? Do you feel an obligation to obey what she has just commanded you? Well, I don't think so. I think the first question is going to be, well, who are you? Why? Why should I get up and leave now? Now, what if she says to you, well, I'm just a customer and I don't really like you, get up and leave now? Do you have an obligation to get up and leave? No, you don't. Doesn't seem to be any obligation to obey that command. All right, so another scenario. Let's say you finish your meal, the lady at the table next to you says, "Get up and leave now." You ask the question, well, why? Who are you? And she says, well, I'm an FBI agent. I'm undercover. We're about to bust the owner of this restaurant. Get up and leave now. Do you get up and leave? Yes, you do. It now seems to be an appropriate obligation to follow that command. Now, notice in all three scenarios, whether it's the fortune cookie, the customer, or the FBI agent, the command is the same. Get up and leave now. But in the first two cases, there's no obligation to obey the command, whereas the third situation, there is an obligation to obey the command. So what's the difference? Well, in the third situation, we have an appropriate authority that backs up the command, that then creates this obligation to obey the command. So the appropriate authority, the FBI agent, is issued the command. Not just a customer, it's not just your fortune cookie, but it's an appropriate authority. And so when we think through this, we realize, well, an obligation only makes sense in light of some kind of relationship between persons. Right? I don't have obligations to inanimate objects. I don't have an obligation to a rock. Obligations only make sense in the context of persons, but not just any persons. There has to be one person who has the appropriate authority to issue commands. And in the same way, the theist wants to say, look, we have obligations. We have moral obligations because there is an appropriate authority that stands behind the moral commands that we discover in this universe. And the best explanation is that God is the appropriate authority. And so that's why moral obligations, the theist would argue, it only makes sense in the context of the existence of God.